Hi guys, today we are going to demonstrate a complete flushing procedure in accordance with OEM specifications using our toolbox W04 on a 2-liter TDI Golf 7. Today we've ventured out of our studio once again and have come to the training campus of the Hanover Chamber of Trades and Crafts. You've no doubt heard that the cooling system on models from certain OE vehicle manufacturers such as VW, Audi, Seat, Skoda, BMW and Mercedes needs to be cleaned and flushed using special equipment. And today we're showing you how you can flush and clean this type of cooling system with our toolbox W04 using a Golf 7 with a 2-liter diesel engine as our example vehicle. Torben, could you first explain why it's important to flush the cooling system? What's the reason for doing it? Coolant fulfills 3 functions: cooling the engine, acting as an anti-freeze agent and protecting the surfaces of aluminium components. Coolant is actually intended to last the vehicle's entire lifetime. But sometimes aluminum components such as the radiator, the heat exchanger for the heating or the charged air cooler need to be replaced during repair work. In this case, the whole cooling system must be flushed and cleaned. Exactly. The surfaces are protected by additives in the coolant. If we remove an aluminum component from the system, such as the heat exchanger, then fit a new part, its surfaces will lack this protection and it can only be provided by fresh additives. Because we have a lifetime coolant fill here, the additives in it have already been distributed to all existing components. This means these additives are now missing from the old coolant, which is why we need to completely remove all the old sludge and refill the system with fresh new coolant. And we're now going to show you the flushing procedure in accordance with OEM specifications. So there are several steps to carry out. First, we have to prepare the vehicle. We then carry out a vacuum check and fill the entire cooling system with distilled water. We then flush the cooling system twice with distilled water. After that, we flush it 2 more times with coolant. Once that has been done, we check the coolant level and quality and finish by bleeding the cooling system according to the manufacturer's instructions using a diagnostic computer. Let's get started. So now we've finished preparing the vehicle. To connect the flushing equipment, we just need an adapter from toolbox W01. We then get the equipment ready and connect our pump to the vehicle battery. Now we connect the hose to our pump. At first glance it looks quite complex, but don't worry. We've used specially designed adapters that can't be mixed up. They only fit one way. You use distilled water for flushing. For our Golf 7 here, we need about 20 liters of distilled water and 20 liters of coolant. These quantities may vary depending on the vehicle model and engine. We now connect the 2 supplied adapters, one with a suction hose for the new fluid and one for the used coolant, to the containers. First we have to bleed the equipment. To do so, we turn the pump on and briefly open stopcocks A and B so that we don't pump any air into the cooling system. Next we attach the equipment to the adapter on the expansion tank. We now create a vacuum in the cooling system. To do this, disconnect the drain hose from the valve block and connect our venturi nozzle from the toolbox in its place. Simply place the end of the hose in any empty container. Now we attach our compressed air supply to our venturi nozzle and slowly open stopcock B until we have achieved a vacuum pressure of at least minus 0.85 bar. We then close stopcock B and disconnect the compressed air supply. The pressure in the cooling system must not start to increase again. With the pump switched on, we slowly open stopcock A. Distilled water starts to fill the cooling system due to the vacuum inside it. The pump automatically supplies distilled water and switches off as soon as the cooling system is full. You then close stopcock A again. We now have excess pressure in the cooling system that has to be released. For this, remove the venturi nozzle and reattach the drain hose to connector B on the valve block. We now slowly open stopcock B. Once the pressure has been released, close stopcock B again. So the cooling system has been completely filled with distilled water. Now it's time to flush it with distilled water. Make sure you follow the OEM instructions, as additional work may have to be carried out on some models. On our Golf 7 here, we first had to disconnect the coolant temperature sensor and run the engine for 1 minute. We now start to flush using distilled water. To do this, we connect our flush hose to the expansion tank's return hose and close the expansion tank with the plug. Now it's time to flush our Golf with distilled water. We want to flush the cylinder block and cylinder head first. To do so, we have to pinch off individual circuits to the complex thermal management system. We've already done that here. Always follow the OEM instructions for this, as it can vary depending on the model and engine. We now flush the system by opening stopcock A here. Distilled water is pumped into the expansion tank and everything is flushed out via the return hose here. Opening stopcock A begins the flushing process. The used coolant will then flow through inspection glass 1. We continue flushing until the coolant in inspection glass 1 starts to lose its color. We flushed the cylinder block and the cylinder head. We now carry out the same flushing process for the heating system's heat exchanger, the radiator and the charged air cooler. Reposition the pinch-off pliers for the individual cooling circuits in accordance with the OEM instructions, and always continue flushing until the fluid in inspection glass 1 starts to lose its color. The 4 flushing processes we just saw must all be repeated using distilled water again. Continue flushing until the fluid in inspection glass 1 and inspection glass 2 is exactly the same color. So we've removed the used coolant from our cooling system, but the whole system is now filled with distilled water. We want to fill it with fresh coolant. This is done by once again carrying out each of the flushing processes using coolant this time. We've now swapped the distilled water for coolant. We keep flushing until the coolant color is clearly noticeable in inspection glass 1. We then carry out each of the separate flushing processes using coolant, just as we did with distilled water. Reposition the pinch-off pliers in accordance with your OEM instructions and flush the individual circuits twice. Once you have flushed all 4 cooling circuits with coolant, you can switch the pump off. There may be some residual pressure in the system. Just open stopcock B to allow the pressure to drop. You now have to reconnect the return hose to the expansion tank. To do so, detach our flush hose and remove the plug. Now the coolant expansion tank is too full. To drain fluid off, we take our suction hose from the container with fresh coolant and our connecting hose. You then switch the pump on again, open stopcocks A and B and introduce the suction hose into the expansion tank. We keep draining until the coolant is on a level with the seam. Finally, the equipment needs to be cleaned. For this, put the suction hose from the container in a container of distilled water. We detach this hose from the return hose. We then connected our adapter to it. You now attach this to stopcock B so that we can clean the entire appliance. The reason for doing this is to prevent the inspection glass from becoming discolored due to the coolant. Last of all, you disconnect the flush hose again and fit the plug onto it. Once that has been done, you can complete the work on the vehicle in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and bleed the entire cooling system using a diagnostic tester. Once you've bled the cooling system with the diagnostic tester, all that remains to do is to check the coolant quality using a refractometer. And then you will have finished flushing the vehicle in accordance with OEM specifications. That is just one of the reasons for having to flush the cooling system. There are others too, namely whenever there's any doubt about the coolant's composition. Maybe the wrong coolant has been added, for example, non-distilled water used for topping up. There are contaminants in the system, or possibly even corrosion. In such cases, the cooling system always has to be cleaned and flushed. This applies to older vehicles too. Individual cooling circuits do not need to be pinched off in this case. Here the system is flushed via the return hose only, and this can be also done using our toolbox W04. All makes sense? See you next time in the workshop.